This is a special podcast from the Triple Helix Cambridge Café Scientifique, sponsored by the Medical Research Council and the Learning Revolution. I'm Ben Valsler from thenakedscientists.com. This podcast is an archive of the entire presentation on Nanofoods by Dora Pereira from the MRC's Human Nutrition Research Laboratories.
So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what this all involves, what we are talking about when we talk about nanofoods. Because probably you think nanofoods are very small, tiny foods, but they actually are not. They are a terminology that's used for a nanotechnology application in the food sector. So that can be from the agriculture, so the harvesting or the production of an actual food to food processing. So why are we interested in shrinking down nutrition in this sense? Just to give you, for those that don't know the Medical Research Council, our mission statement is to encourage and support research and improve human health. And we do that by communicating our science the best we can to the members of the public, to produce and train very skilled researchers, and promote the dialogue within the public and the scientists. That's what we are trying to do when we come to these events like this. So in terms of nanotechnology, what is a nanometer? Nanometer is the measure that we commonly speak about when we speak about nanotechnology. And that's a 1,000 millionth of a meter. And just to give you an idea, it's the same. So 1 nanometer is compared to 1 meter is the same as comparing the diameter of a 5p coin to the diameter of planet Earth. So that's the sort of scale we are talking about. So we have natural present molecules, for example. We have DNA, which is around 1 nanometer, water molecule, sugar molecule. So they are all considered natural nanoparticles because they are in the nano size. So when we talk about nanotechnology, they are not all these man-made compounds or particles that don't actually exist. They occur naturally both in our diet and also in our body. They can have many different shapes and sizes. So we can have carbon-based structures, for example, these nanotubes or the buckyballs called fullerenes, and they are mostly applied in electronics or materials science. They are not very applied in the more nutrition field, as we will see. We have also the nanoworms. They are particles of iron that can detect tumors, and they can bind to tumors. And then we have also the quantum dots and the other particles of iron that are used as contrasting agents for MRI, for example. In terms of food, there are many applications of nanotechnology in food, from the agriculture, for example, in reducing the use of pesticides. So if you actually reduce the size of the spray particles that you use to spray the crops with pesticides, you can actually improve very much their way of working. So you reduce the amount of pesticides you use. And that's an application just down in the production's agricultural side. Then we also have the food processing. For example, there's a lot of talk about nanocoatings. In this example, these cheeses, they have a special coating that has nano silver particles that are antimicrobial and anti-fungicide, so they prevent the growth of mold or bacteria, and they are edible as well. So you can eat them, and they actually they are not toxic. So the cheeses, the storage life improves very much. These are not available in the UK. We don't actually have any nanofood products yet commercially available or approved. But in the US, there are many, and also in the Asian countries. Another application is in the ketchup or mayonnaise or salad creams in the flowing, to improve their flow, how they flow out of the bottle, so that you don't have to keep banging on the bottle to actually get the mayonnaise out or the ketchup. And these are, the plastic of the bottle is aligned with a nano compound that improves the flowing of the liquid or the emulsion inside the bottle. So that is a very promising field. So a lot of food industries are quite keen on this application. As I said, in the US, there are many commercial nanofood products, mostly in the dietary supplements area. And we have, I think they have about 50 nutritional supplements that are or have a component that it's nano size, so the nanometer scale. And they can go from a type of vitamin to minerals, mostly minerals like silver, magnesium. They also have this product that's very well known in the US, the Slim Shake. It's the same brand but a different product from what you can buy here, of like the Slim Fast or Slim Shake products, because it has a nano-coated chocolate. So it's actually supposed to provide a very high chocolate flavor, but it has a very low chocolate actual content. So it's has less fat and less sugar, but it actually gives more taste. That's what they claim. I haven't tried this. We have this maternal mineral water designed for babies and moms that has silver, again, nano-silver. And silver is a very antimicrobial compound, so the immune system of the baby is still not fully developed. This mineral water is supposed to boost their immune system by giving them nano-silver that's supposed to fight microbes. Here we have a product that's very known in China. It's called nano tea. It's actually green tea that... the green tea is not nano-sized, but it's sort of fortified with selenium and other micronutrients that are nano-sized. Another type of nanofood that's very sought after by the food industries, and I was actually involved in a consultation about nanotechnology application to foods in the House of Lords last March. There was a lady there from Unilever talking about that this technology will probably be available in the UK very soon. And these are called the nano-emulsions. So it's when you produce a product like mayonnaise, for example, that's an emulsion of oil in water. So these emulsions will be based in that, but they will be low-fat. So normally to make a low-fat product, you just have to increase the content of water and decrease the content of fat. But if you do that, the emulsion just gets very liquid and starts to separate. So they have a lot of problems in creating reduced fat products like mayonnaise, and they often have to add starch or other emulsifying agent. And they are trying to make a solution to that by creating these nano-emulsions, which are basically droplets within droplets. So you have a droplet of water that's surrounded by a droplet of oil, and that's surrounded by another droplet of water, and that will decrease very much the fat content in the emulsion, but still keeping the same consistency. What we are doing actually at the Medical Research Council Human Nutrition Research is trying to apply nanotechnology, but in the field we work in biominerals, so we work in minerals, and we're trying to develop new mineral supplements that are based on nanotechnology, and therefore will be better absorbed, will be a safer option than mineral supplements that are already available. And because we can coat them, for example, like in this example, with biocompatible polymers or compounds, then they will be better tolerated and they will give less adverse effects. So we're doing this mostly with iron to prevent iron deficiency anemia, which is a huge health problem and the biggest nutritional deficiency in the world still today. But can also be applied to zinc, selenium, chromium, all minerals, micronutrients that are essential. So that's how we became interested in this area. But moving up a bit in the scale, when we talk on nanometer scale, the nanotechnology scale, we're normally referring to everything that's below 100 nanometers, so 0.1 micron. But we actually have, and we don't realize, a lot of particles in our diet already, in UK and in other countries, that are just above that nano size, and they are called the submicron particles. And they are often in the class of food additives, for example. Titanium dioxide is one of them, silicates another. So this one is used as a whitening in products like toothpaste, and silicates are used as emulsifiers and flowing agents in powdered foods. A while back in London, we did a study comparing the daily intakes of these two types of particles in the population, and we thought that per day, in terms of just silicates, people normally ingest about 34 milligrams of silicates total per day per person in UK, and 5.9 milligrams of titanium dioxide. So these particles are getting in our gut. They are staying there because they are not actually absorbed. They are very large to be absorbed. They will then eventually be secreted in feces. Some are just accumulating in the lining of our gut. As far as we know, they don't have an inflammatory or toxic action, but they are just staying there and they accumulate throughout our lives. So we are also in our group studying the effects that this accumulation of these particles can have in diseases, for example, Crohn's disease or colon cancer, people that are more susceptible and that have an inflamed gut lining tissue. So those food additives are present in all different white tablets we take. All the medicines are coated in titanium dioxide, that's why they are very white. In mayonnaise and salad creams, and in normal toothpaste, but mostly in the whitening types of toothpaste. And I wanted to leave you with the idea that nanoparticles are actually, some of them are natural, that we have them in our diet in normal products, not only the ones that have food additives added to them. And just because they are small, they may not be perceived as being as safe as the larger forms of the same compound. And that's where there is a lot of action needed to raise public awareness and public perception on the nanotechnology field and application to foods, to inform them that the UK government and the other legislative bodies are actually working very hard in conjunction with the EU to define legislation in terms of nanofoods and nanotechnology. How do we assess the safety of these compounds? We cannot apply the same standard safety tests as we do for larger size compounds. So we need to be very careful, and we need to assess a case by case of the actual chemical nature of the particle. There was a study done in Nature Nanotechnology a few months back, and there is a very bad press about nanotechnology application to foods or to other applications in medicine, but mostly in foods. And people are comparing this technology very much to genetic modified foods. And we have to bear in mind that we cannot put all these in the same umbrella and just consider that all the technology is bad just because there are a few compounds that actually produce very toxic effects. So don't go away and think that, oh my God, this is all bad now. There are many good things that can come from this technology, and people just need to be informed, I think.
That was the MRC's Dora Pereira explaining the ever-increasing role of nanotechnology in our food. Now, the advantage of Cafe Scientifique is that you get to put your questions to the speaker. So let's see what it was that you wanted to know.
What are the issues with the safety testing? Why is it different from testing from normal food additives?
Mm-hmm. Basically, it's a difference in size. Because even if you're testing the same compound, for example, the titanium dioxide that is used in micron size is tested normally in cell-based assays, but obviously because these are large compounds, the cells may not take up the compounds as well as if they were small, because the size of an average human cell is in the micron range, so 10, 20 microns. So obviously you won't take up things that are larger than itself. The toxicity issue there, it's only a toxicity issue at the surface rather than if the cells actually are taking up these particles and metabolizing them in some way. The nanoparticles, they are very small, so they can get in like any soluble compound would be able to get in the cell. So then we need to assess the toxicity in terms of, will these particles be stable inside the cell? Will they dissolve? Will they metabolize into different compounds? What are the breakdown products of these particles? Ideally, they should be stable and they should only deliver their components where needed. For example, in the iron supplement we are working on, we test the uptake of these iron nanoparticles in cells of the gut. We see how much iron does that release, and does that then the particles, do they release something else that will be toxic to the cells
You were talking about sort of umbrella terms, and I'm wondering whether the term nanofoods might sort of fall under that category. I mean, you've got sort of on the one hand, you've got actual particles of something that may not normally be in food, and at the other side, you've got something that's a sort of a nanoscale construction, like in the mayonnaise. Do you find it useful to sort of give a size-based naming to all of these different technologies?
The definitions of the nanofood it's not a very scientific term, and it's something that the press has started to use to refer to all the applications of nanotechnology in the food sector. But actually, just the definition of what's a nano size has been a source of a lot of controversy, because people think that should only go up to 100 nanometers. There was this report from the Royal Society saying that everything nano is from 1 to 100 nanometers. But then there are people that say, well, but if it's 120 and it has added safety concerns, should also that not be nano? Because then the legislation will be different. If it falls under the nano category, then you need to apply certain toxicology tests. And if it's not nano, then you have other types of tests. There is a lot of concern, and people are now believing that everything that is submicron, so that would include all the food additives we have already in our diet, should be considered as part of the nano terminology. So it's difficult to put everything in the same umbrella.
You mentioned that it's not available yet in the UK, but is it in any other European countries? Is it controlled at the EU level, or?
The EU level is they have this very big nanotechnology funding program to invest in defining these safety tests and legislation as well, and they have a consultation around all the member states, and the UK included. That's why we were involved in this House of Lords consultation. And with the Food Standards Agency as well, they have consultations with every member state about legislation, how they should apply the legislation to these smaller nano-sized products. But it's still very much sort of in the air. They know they should be treated differently, but they still don't know what is the best way to treat these new foods. So they are not commercially available, as they are not sold in the EU, but obviously people can buy them from the US or from China or Japan. And so that's why they are starting these discussions to make people aware of the technology, and that they are thinking about the legislation and how best to apply it.
You mentioned there's some potential application of nanotechnology for conditions such as Crohn's disease. Is there any potential technology to help us tackle things like obesity and diabetes, perhaps?
Only in production of more like this new nano-emulsion, the droplets within droplets. If it makes the reduced fat food with a better taste and more like the normal fat food, probably people will be able to increase the intake of those reduced fat foods. But and when I spoke about Crohn's disease, it's not actually in terms of treating, but it's actually these particles could actually have a very important role in just the trigger of Crohn's disease.
If you say that actually the E numbers could classify as nanofoods, it's always said they're the best studied ingredient within our food. So if they're actually nanoparticles, the testing that they undergo would actually change if that definition of a nanofood changed. And
yes. These, for example, these silicates are an example of that, because when they are produced in the micron size, so hundreds of nanometers, they don't actually get inside the cells, and they don't produce an inflammation or a cytotoxicity in the tissue as such. But if you produce them in the nano size, so in 10, 20 nanometers, they have a very high toxicity in the cells. So this Slim Shake product has raised a lot of controversy because it has this silicate, nanosilicates coating the cocoa particles to try and make them more chocolatey in some way. And in studies in cells and in animals, the toxicity of silicate nanosize is very large, so that has raised very big concerns. So that's why they think that just the chemical nature of a compound, it's not perceived a sign of if it's safe or not safe, like we thought up till now. It's a question of size as well. So it can be safe in a certain size, but then if you go smaller or if you go larger, then the safety could be different and unrelated, yes. The E numbers, for example, the titanium dioxide or the silicates, they have this E number already defined and the safety assessment done for this particular application, but it's in a certain size, so it has this specification. If they go smaller, then they will have to apply for a different E number and it will have different safety assessment.
I was just wondering how you actually go about making like a nanofood. For example, how do you make a droplet of water coated with a droplet of water or coated with a droplet of water, or how do you coat your mineral iron or something with some sort of nanoparticle? How do you actually do that?
Well, it's sort of a chemical. In terms of the nano-emulsions, I'm not too sure. It's a technology probably involving some kind of spraying in water of fat droplets, and I'm not sure how Unilever does that. Obviously, that's not sort of public knowledge. In terms of our, for example, the iron compound, it's an iron oxide, so the normal iron that we find in our food, that's normally very insoluble. But if we take some dietary organic acids that are present in fruits, for example, or grapes, apples, like tartaric acid, and we combine them together in a chemical reaction, then the tartaric acid, so the organic acid, prevents the iron oxide from polymerizing and getting bigger and bigger. So it will make them become like smaller and coated in this organic acid. Not very easy to explain here. It depends on the pH and on the solution conditions.
And so by making them more soluble, they're more easily taken up into the body?
Yes, because one of the big problems with iron, and that's why the iron deficiency is such a big health problem, is that the compounds, the iron that we get normally in food, not the meat, like meat-based products, the iron is very well absorbed, and people don't normally have a problem in absorbing that iron. But the iron that comes from vegetable foods like spinach or lentils or other pulses, it's that iron oxide type, and it's very insoluble. So as soon as it gets in our stomach, then it starts polymerizing and precipitates, and then our cells in the small intestine cannot absorb that iron. So by making it smaller and surrounded by this organic acid that will stabilize it and keep it smaller, then they will be able to be taken up more efficiently.
You get lots of things like cereals that say with added iron. Is that actually really quite hard to absorb then?
Yes. I actually on Saturday, just this Saturday, I was giving on the Festival of Ideas, I was giving a talk about iron, and people always ask about the fortified cereals, and it's actually surprisingly, it's the worst type of iron it's the worst absorbed iron, it's the one that's added to breakfast cereals, because the problem with iron is very reactive. So iron, the one that's present in foods, it's the same iron that causes rust. So obviously that's not very pleasant. If they were to add that into breakfast cereals, it would smell like rust and it would taste like rust. So what they actually do is just add the mineral itself. So just if you get a magnet and if you have some iron, you see the particles attracting to a magnet. So that's the type of iron that they add to cereals, the same iron you get in the iron cores. Just a mineral. And very tiny particles, and they add that to cereals. And on one of the science festivals, we had some students, and we said, well, we put a magnet, put some of these breakfast cereals in a water solution. And with the magnet, we actually, over time, I think it takes about 2-3 hours, you actually see the little dots of iron that's fortified on the actual breakfast cereal to be completely attracted by the magnet. So obviously, when that gets into the stomach, part of it gets, by the acid of the stomach, gets dissolved, and you will absorb something. It's not to say that breakfast cereals fortified are not good for you, especially for children, because children absorb much more iron anyway. They don't have the regulation mechanisms we have as adults. So actually they will absorb still a fraction. And because the intake of red meat has decreased over time, especially in children, fortified breakfast cereals are probably the biggest source of iron they will have. So
But you could just as well grating some nails and be
Chewing on some it won't be as pleasant. But we are actually, this technology that we've developed of these our iron compounds, we think probably that they will not alter the properties of food that much, the organoleptic properties of food like taste and smell and color. So probably there will be an application for that in fortified foods as well, but we're still just in the stage of testing them in volunteers just for absorption.
Sorry, just something you said then. When you said the type of iron that's easiest for the body to accept is actually rust?
No, no, that's the type of iron that's present in the food is rust, the same type as rust, so iron oxide.
Right.
The easiest type of iron to be absorbed is the iron present in red meat,
Right.
or animal food products, but mostly in red meat because it's in the blood. It's called heme iron, so the bloodier the meat, the more iron we'll have. Like liver and organ food are the ones that have the highest iron content.
When you're testing your product, how far away from seeing it in things, not necessarily in this country because there's obviously the legislation problems, but in, say, America or China?
Yes. With our compound, we actually haven't really advertised it as nano because of all these connections to nano, and we're in the stage of testing that. We have tested it, some of the compounds already in volunteers just for absorption. We haven't yet done a clinical trial to look at adverse effects. We are testing them first in cell-based assays to look at toxicity in cells, and then to try and define a dose, and then we will move on to do a clinical trial and test the tolerability. We have to keep it in mind that it is made with dietary products, so it's the rust iron, so iron oxide that's present in food normally, and then organic acids that are also present in the same type of food. But you combine them together and make these compounds. And that's the way we are selling them to funding bodies. And we hope that within the next 5 years, probably we'll be able to have the clinical trial, and then we'll be able to roll it out quickly. Because the advantage with this compound is that because it's a natural occurring, all the constituents are naturally occurring in foods at the levels that are present in foods. We don't need to go through the lengthy process of animal testing and then moving on to phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trial. That's why we were able to test it immediately in human subjects.
Is there a reason that you can't make this heme iron, as you were saying? Because obviously
Heme iron,
that's
yeah,
ideal.
it's the best absorbed, but when it's in the meat product or the animal product. First, because it's very insoluble, it's very difficult to, once it's out of the actual food product, if you take it as a supplement. In the US, I think there was a supplement available of heme iron, very expensive because it's very difficult to extract from the meat, and then it will become very expensive because of that. But it wasn't very well absorbed because it wasn't in the food matrix. There's something there that the heme iron needs to, in order to be absorbed. And there are also concerns about safety associated with heme iron and animal iron products like red meat in terms of colon cancer risk.
With the exception of the packaging types you were discussing, most of these seem to be in kind of additives and supplements.
Yeah.
Is there any place for nano-food technology in a population that eats a healthy, balanced diet?
This is not the Medical Research Council speaking, but I personally am of the opinion that you don't need dietary supplements if you have a healthy, balanced diet, and closer to nature the best. But obviously there are population groups that will never be able to have that. So for those groups, it's useful. Preschool children, for example, in the UK, there is a prevalence of anemia in preschool children of 30%, because the diet is not very good. We know that kids don't actually have a very well and balanced diet in the UK and in other European countries. So they will need an added iron, either from breakfast cereals or other fortified foods with iron, or from an occasional iron supplement. If the iron levels are low, then for a week or two you could go on an iron supplement. And the problems with the ones that exist now is that they give very high incidence of adverse effects. The one that's mostly used is ferrous sulfate. It's very reactive and it causes constipation. So people normally that have to take an iron tablet, they will take it for a week and then stop because they become either bloated, very constipated, with diarrhea, with abdominal pain. And then compliance is not good and their iron level doesn't improve. So
you think it would be easier for them to eat a healthy, balanced diet?
Yeah, to increase the intake of red meat and spinach. And there are things that can actually help absorption of iron, for example, vitamin C. If you have spinach with if you have orange juice with the breakfast cereal, for example, that will increase the absorption of the iron from the breakfast cereal. But then, on the other hand, you normally have breakfast cereal with milk, and calcium in milk decreases iron absorption. So, if you have milk, breakfast cereal, and an orange juice, you might just absorb something. And then, if you have meat together with lentils and spinach, other inorganic iron products, meat also increases the absorption of iron. Wine decreases, so tea also decreases. So, there's also these to have in mind. I'm talking about iron because that's what I'm working on, but all the other micronutrients will have the same problems in terms of absorption.
The Triple Helix Café Scientifique is sponsored by the Medical Research Council, and this has been a special podcast produced by me, Ben Valsler, from thenakedscientists.com, and supported by the Learning Revolution.